Thank you, and it's a real privilege to be here. I'm going to tell you a little story about a memetic journey on my memetic diet. So we have these things called memes, these symbols, these ideas. They get transmitted to each other through gestures and through rituals, and they are, in fact, what makes up our life and perception, our thoughts. Peter Gruber, an American film producer, said that there's 10,000 years worth of stories encoded into our DNA. So we have all of these stories, listeners and tellers. These stories transform our societies, our religions, everything about us. And when these stories, which are like the hundreds and hundreds of memes, little puzzle pieces inside of these stories, they all get put together. They become representative of maybe just one meme. So I began to wonder, who am I? Where did all of these memes come from? And how the hell did they get inside of me? I certainly didn't put them there myself, but somehow I am the way I am. So I began to think, all these memes stuck in my subconscious, part of my dreams, these ideas, they're inside, and how on earth did they first form? So initially, thousands of years ago, well, let me change that part. So I found them hijacking my prefrontal lobes and my parietal lobes and my reticular activating system such that I could just see them everywhere. So 1,000 years ago around the campfire, we had, 1,000 years ago around the campfire, we had storytellers. And the storyteller would begin to cast a spell his words part of his movie script, so that pretty soon he was by the flickering fire at 14 hertz, which is the brain entrainment of alpha. Now we have the American campfire, our flat screen campfire. Seated around, everybody, American meditation is what I call it. So, what did I do? I did what any good QSer would do. I decided to quantify and create a neurological environment so that I could, in fact, brainwash myself. Yes, I will brainwash myself, and I will use hemoencephalography. I will use heart rate variability. I will use neurofeedback and amygdala stabilization. I will become like Yoda, Tony Robbins, and Neo on steroids. First, I needed to wake up in the morning. What did I do? So first I needed to wake up in the morning, and part of my internal dialogue needed to change. So there was connecting with a source. There was finding a way for me to change that internal dialogue and connect with the source. Then I took hydration. I did a hydrating drink of lemon, ginger, 72 trace minerals, aloe, and this began the very beginning of how I would take this memetic diet to a new level. I also took organic chemistry, and I took essential oils, peppermint, sage, rosemary. Rosemary being key because rosemary inhibits the uptake inhibitors for acetylcholine. So when you inhale rosemary, you get a bit jacked up. Then I did the Tibetan 5 rites, which is a 2,500-year-old exercise, and it is to stimulate all the different glands in your endocrine system. Then I moved over to heart rate variability. When you have your heart and your breath in sync, there's something called heart rate coherence. Mostly nobody walks around with this at all. When you find you're in that space, you have a much greater open alpha space. Memes, ideas will stick deeper into your consciousness when you're in that state. So taking heart rate variability and watching videos, my chosen memes, put me in that state of alpha and hypnosis and began to download in this way all of these different ideas. Then I changed over to hemoencephalography, where I brought blood flow up to the prefrontal lobes. When you focus on anything, you will begin to get into that place I call the the seat of the king, the throne. So taking that is what begins to bring vision into your parietal lobes. I also did alpha and beta training. Right now, this is the first time in history where you can actually see a direct reflection of yourself internally, your brain waves. And to be able to see that and manipulate it at will is unlike anything you can ever imagine. You get a texture of state that is unbelievable. I also use neurooptimal so that I could get amygdala stabilization. Your amygdala is the seat of your emotion, and anytime there's destabilization there, it's harder to gain that nice centeredness. So here's what I learned. You absolutely can self-indoctrinate yourself. You can. Self-hypnosis has been used for thousands of years. When you think about it, prayer, what is prayer to the mind if it's not the repetitious incantation of language patterns? If you concentrate on something for an extended period of time, you will gain thalamic asymmetry. So what this does is it begins to, again, feed the parietal lobes, your vision, whatever it is that you're focusing on. Franciscan nuns and Buddhists, entire different ideologies or different belief systems, same parts of the brains lighting up. So when you actually turn your internal language into something of a meditation, you can absolutely change how you feel and see and think. Now, one challenge I did run into is that being the man behind the curtain, trying to brainwash the man behind the curtain, kept having a voice come up saying, don't pay attention to that man behind the curtain. Essentially, like Kay, you run into an interesting flow of what it's like to actually self-brainwash yourself. You need discipline. When you are tracking your memetic diet, you can't just look at every single meme that comes along because they begin to affect you in a way that makes you feel incongruent. Also, you got to have trust. Eventually, you just got to be able to trust yourself. And that's all I have. This was a very unique experience for me. I'm very grateful for it. There's so much more that I had to say. You can tell I really get animated, and 7.5 minutes at 15 seconds apiece was like, do or die. So I really appreciate Josh for keeping me focused that way, and for all of you for doing that work. Thank you. Yes, sir.
How disconnected from yourself did you feel when you did all this?
How disconnected? Oh, just the opposite. More connected than I'd ever could imagine. In fact, the ability to do that makes me feel 10 times more connected to you. Even though I was really nervous doing it this way, now that I'm standing in front of you, extemporaneous and just talking to you, I'm not nervous at all. I can feel like I can connect with any one of you, and this is where I feel more natural. I felt absolutely deeply more in that heart space, that alpha space, than you could ever imagine. Very, very cool, yes. Yes, sir.
I've kind of studied all the stuff that you've studied more or less for a long time, states of consciousness, a lot of biofeedback and research, circumstance, and everything. Are you familiar with Ken Wilber's application of Piagetian developmental principles of evolutionary states of consciousness?
I know Ken Wilber's work, and I haven't dug into that for a long time.
It would give you an organizational structure that would really transform your whole way of looking at this stuff. That it's developmental, essentially. That's really the key phenomenon in all this stuff, is that there are developmental states you go through, and what facilitates us from one state to another won't work here or here. So there's a whole...
Right. Thanks. Yes?
So what were your findings on the modern day campfire?
Okay, so when you watch television, it puts you not only in an alpha state, but it really shuts off your left hemisphere. So you're numbing out, and in that time that you're numbing out, I would say your reticular activating system, the servo mechanism that makes you see anything that you imprint it with, Like when you go to buy a car, when you want to buy a new car and you're like, I want a new BMW, it's like, why do you see it everywhere you look? You made that important to a particular part of your brain. So when you watch television, you're really downloading and you're really beginning to imprint that part, so it kind of morphs your consciousness. It is, and I still watch a lot of video, it is probably one of the worst things that you can do. Is to have a heavy diet of television. Of course, the memes themselves, the quality of the video. Now, I watched a lot of a particular type of video. I'm not going to go into the types that I watched because I'd rather it be about the process than what my content was. Your content would be completely different. But again, when you get into hypnosis and you're able to, in a ritual state, watch something over and over again, it begins to rebubble up into your consciousness. So I found myself driving, not thinking about things that I might have seen on Facebook, but thinking about something in particular that I had been ingesting. I call it, I keep using this metaphor of a diet. Yeah, so it brings us together, but I'm afraid the indoctrination of the television, the campfire of our families, not so hot. Yes, sir.
Did you say that, like, through heart rate variability training, when you're in a state of coherence, you're kind of like the memes penetrate more?
Well,
like you're more susceptible to the imprinting of the memes?
No, no. So when you find heart rate coherence, you're in a very deep alpha state. So I found that when I'm in that state and I actually raise my serotonin and oxytocin levels, whatever the memes were that I connected to it. That's what a good advertisement is about, getting you into a heightened state and then giving you the visual so that you keep that connected forever. So when I got myself into those heightened states of receptivity, then what I was listening to, did seem for me to sink in much, much deeper.
Do you think that could potentially have negative effects depending on what it was that you were consuming at that time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's why I noticed it. I mean, I didn't watch any, because, you get on Facebook, and I know there's a lot of QSers here, so you don't get sucked into the Facebook vortex, do you? But, you click on something. Everything you click on now has a 30-second ad in front of it. Or you find yourself like, my old friend from high school is really into conspiracy theory stuff. And next thing I know, I'm watching something for 7 minutes. Oh my God, the Illuminati's are gonna, and my whole day gets kind of hijacked by, that particular hypnotic state and download of that particular meme. So yes, your memetic diet is something very important. Yes, ma'am.
What's your resource for self-hypnosis? Is it self-induced, or do you have a resource that you use?
I would say self-induced. I also play around with neurofeedback, so I'm able to look at a direct mirror, and when I'm actually getting into deep theta state, it's really obvious. But by the time you're getting there, you don't care. Yes.
Do you find yourself affected by physical proximity to certain people who have certain frames of mind or a certain mindset?
Yeah, that'll, there's not necessarily a lot of science behind it, but absolutely. How do I want to say this? So yes, I absolutely think our brain waves travel. I think our heart field, the magnetics of your actual heart, has been tracked as much as 15 feet. So if I walk up to somebody who's kind of on the bad side, at about 15 feet, you'll get that feeling of contraction. You want to pull away. Horses, 30 to 45 feet, they can feel you from a distance. So yes, I absolutely believe that having strong brain waves, you can project them into other people. Brainwave entrainment. I mean, you look into somebody's eyes, and if you're psychically or you're mentally stronger than they are, you put them into a trance. And that's what some unscrupulous people do. I absolutely believe that.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.